I mean, this complete debacle around the water charges, it strikes Sinn Féin that this is Fine Gael just setting the agenda for the government in a very public way, and Labour willingly falling in line. And the process, and it's no accident, I think this, so pardon the pun, this leak came from the Department of the Environment first, from Phil Hogan's department, putting it right up to Labour in the middle of their party conference. The Taoiseach, to the Labour leader, despite the rhetoric of his speech, denies there's anything happening in this issue. The Taoiseach then confirms there is. There's complete confusion around the detail of all of that, but what is for certain is that this is another stealth tax, another burden on working people, on those who can ill afford, yet more punitive charges from this government who clearly are ideologically committed to privatisation. In the north, Sinn Féin opposed the privatisation of water and stopped any charges being placed, any additional charges being placed upon the citizens. The government should follow that example here.
What is Sinn Féin going to do now about what we know so far, that there will be people will be asked to pay for water meters? Whatever.
Well, let's see the detail. Let's wait. I mean, there's a lot of the waters were muddied very much by the different and contrary and contradictory statements by the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach. Clearly the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. That may be clear after today's cabinet meeting, and Sinn Féin will then give our considered view of all that.
Are you opposed to the setting up of an Irish water utility?
Yes, we see that something that perhaps before this term of government is over, that they will be announcing that this will need to be privatised the way they're announcing the privatisation of other state assets.
To those who say that you can't fix the infrastructure like you've spoken about, they can't stop the leaking unless there are charges and more funding put into it, what do you say to them?
Well, we have put forward costed propositions. We did it before the last budget. We've done it at every opportunity, and one of those includes both straightening out the necessary infrastructure, because it is in a poor state, using National Pension Reserve Fund for doing that, getting people back to work, that element of the construction industry which could usefully put back to work, and give people what in this century people should accept as a norm, that we get clean, decent drinking water and water for the use of citizens.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Michael Ure, thanks everyone.
The installation of the meters. I've seen even in today's papers reflections of various costs of meters, from €30 to €200 to €300, and the cost of installation varying in various locations around the country. That's all a matter for discussion and a matter for determination by Bord Gáis when they set up Irish Water together with the regulator. As I said, Deputy MacDonald, the government will determine what the allowance to be free allocation actually is.
Thank you, Taoiseach. 1 minute.
But just to set the record straight, over £1 billion sterling has been invested in water improvement in the north. There are no household water charges. We saw to that, and there is no prospect of that. And there is no prospect of the service being privatised. Those are the facts. Those are the facts, Taoiseach.
Sorry, would you please?
I find it
would you please ask your supplementary question, Deputy?
I find it absolutely astonishing that you say that it will be a matter for discussion whether or not water supply would be cut off to houses and homes across this state. I find that is a direct quote, Taoiseach. This will be a matter for discussion. There can't be any discussion on that matter.
A question, please.
Water, as you say yourself, is an absolute essential for any decent standard or quality of living. You've conceded that yourself. You say that the speculation as regards the costs that are doing the rounds in the public arena are just speculation. But in the absence of any clarity from the government, there will be that speculation.
Thank you.
You have failed this
Deputy.
morning to answer in any substantive way for the citizens of this state what level of charge they will be facing. And most astonishingly, you will not rule out the prospect of cutting off water supply to people's homes. I think that is a disgrace, Taoiseach.
We have met the Troika on a number of occasions, and they're back in town, and we requested a meeting and contacted, as was the routine, the finance department to arrange that meeting, and we were told there would be no meeting, that the Troika was not meeting with opposition parties. We then contacted the different parties in the Troika itself, and they confirmed that we're writing to them. We found that it was very useful for us to be able to explain a different view of what was happening, but also to sift out the government spin about what the Troika was saying and what the Troika was actually telling us. And the Troika pointedly on a number of occasions made it very, very clear that the detail of what the government does is a matter for the government. In other words, the Troika would say, no, we don't insist that there be privatisation of services or utilities. We don't insist that there be extra charges for water. This would be a matter for the government. We may have a view of it, but this is the government's decision. Where the government all the time come up with this, big boys made me do it, we have to do this because of the Troika. So we think it's an entirely undemocratic step. It isn't clear whether this is at the government's request, that the government didn't like the alternative voice, the alternative view that was being expressed. It's totally disrespectful of the mandates of all of the opposition parties, and as the lead party in opposition on these issues and against what's essentially a failed and failing government policy, we will be writing to the government again on this issue, and we'll be seeking a meeting with the Troika.
Francie Malloy brought forward a motion this week to the Assembly calling for Lough Neagh to be brought back into public ownership. What would be the benefit of this?
The benefit, first of all, is that you have an overall management structure for Lough Neagh. At the present time, it's a private lough and no management structure for it. The Lough Neagh provides 40% of the domestic water for the north, and actually it's very important that's secured for the future. So it is a big water basin. It is very important that that's not sold off to some other private enterprise, and actually then would be held ransom for water here in the north.
There are many agencies and bodies involved in and around the lough. What is the future for them working together?
Well, I think it is a cross-departmental role, and the executive here actually would have to manage that structure. So it is important that we actually have the overall management of it, and with each department working together, each department has its role. Right to Dale actually has a role in relation to training, for instance, or the water service actually have a role as well. The DARD have a role in regard to the cleaning of the rivers and the dredging of rivers. That goes to be Lough Neagh. And the future of all departments cooperating together would give you an overall management structure for Lough Neagh.
And what would you then believe is the next step?
Well, I think the next step is this working group actually is set up fairly quickly, that it brings together all of the different departments, that is headed up by DCAL and by DARD, so that they actually manage it and ensure that it doesn't actually disappear again. Because people say nothing has happened since the last time when it was proposed by the water service that it should be bought and brought into public ownership. That's the very fact. Nothing has happened. There's been no security of the law, no security and no development of Lough Neagh. Every council around Lough Neagh has to develop at a cost of actually paying a levy to the Shaftesbury estate. We want to see the council be able to develop for tourism, for water sports, for various different structures around the law. Without that proviso that they have to get permission from the Shaftesbury estate or from anyone else to actually be able to develop that.
Porrick, the government has launched its Austerity Treaty website today. What's your reaction to that? What's your position right now on the treaty referendum?
Well, you know, we refer to it as the Austerity Treaty because that's essentially what it is. It's going to enshrine, you know, these failed austerity policies into our constitution, you know, take away decision making from the institution elected by the Irish people behind me and give it to unaccountable people, you know, in the European Commission, the European Court of Justice. So we will campaign vigorously against this treaty, as will others, I'm sure. We'll be holding public meetings in every constituency in the States, running out a very comprehensive postering, leafleting campaign. There'll be a full canvas of all our members across the state, because we feel passionately that this policy of austerity, we've had a plan for jobs and growth, has failed, not just in Ireland but across Europe. There has to be a redirection at this stage, and that's what we're going to be arguing for.
Well, obviously Sinn Féin are pleased with today's opinion poll. It's the first time that we've ever reached a 21% showing. However, we're very much a party of realists, and we've recognised in the past that these opinion polls are only indicative of an opinion of a certain number of people at any given time. We're encouraged by it, but we have to recognise what it's actually saying. 40% of those who were questioned have clearly rejected the so-called establishment parties, the parties of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and the Labour Party, and have opted for alternatives led by Sinn Féin with more than 21%. We're definite in our position leading into the referendum on the 31st of May. It's austerity that is at the back of all of this. People are hurting. They're hurting in a whole myriad of ways, hurting in terms of the ability to spend money in their pocket, being able to provide for their families, both in terms of healthcare, education, bread on the table. These are the serious matters that are challenging people today. Sinn Féin will continue to challenge this government on its failed policy pursuit, aping as it does the policy pursuit of the former administration led by Fianna Fáil. We're confident that that 40% rejection of the three so-called establishment parties will develop into a majority rejection and no vote on the 31st of May.